Fantasy Football Podcast with your host, Nick Anderson.
What is up, Dynasty Degenerates? It's been a long week off. We got a lot to talk about, but this is your boy, Nick Anderson with the Triple D FFP. We are here today with Ethan Turner from the Fantasy Headliners. And you guys, if you have not checked out his product yet, he has something that I have never seen before in the Dynasty Fantasy Football landscape. He's got a 2020 rookie injury guide for the incoming rookies in this draft class, and it is just absolutely phenomenal. We're going to get into it a little bit today, but thank you, Ethan. What's going on, man?
Dude, I'm good, man. I'm busy, but this is a crazy time for me. This is my favorite time of the year. I'm definitely a dynasty analyst. I do redraft stuff too, but man, dynasty is where I got into it. That's where my heart is. So this is like peak dynasty season. I got like 3 or 4 rookie drafts that I got 2 that are already totally done. Like we freaking pounded those rookie drafts out. And then I've got like 3 or 4 more that I still have to do. So I'm like prepping for those. And so this is the time. If you're into dynasty, like this is about as good of a high as you can get.
So did you get any big steals in your 2 rookie drafts that you've already done?
So I've done 2 rookie drafts, totally different approaches for the 2. So one is an industry draft. So there's quite a few big names in that industry draft. The Ball Blast girls are in that. There's another PT, Matt Betts, who does kind of similar stuff to what I do. He's in that league. There's just a bunch of, there's some pretty big names in this league. And so we just started. It was a startup draft that you drafted the picks with basically the players. So we had a startup draft. We included the picks in. And then we, basically had about 6 weeks before the actual NFL draft to trade the picks and trade players. And then we went in and had a rookie draft basically right after. We did the whole thing in a day. So, these guys are like into it. And so in the startup draft, I took the approach that right around this time, the rookie picks were going way too high for what I liked. I wanted a team that was, well-rounded, had a lot of veterans, because I'm always you compete as soon as you start a league. You don't go into a rebuild. That just seems like a bad process. So I basically didn't have any rookie picks. I think I had 1 rookie pick in all of the 30 rounds that we did, just because I thought they were going way too high.
Right.
And then through the course of 6 weeks of not having any sports and not having anything to do, at one point this league, just to give you an idea of how active it is, at one point we had like a 19-day trade streak where we had a trade every day for 19 straight days. So through a bunch of trades, I got some pretty sweet deals using rookie picks from next year. So I don't have really any 2021 picks either, but I have an absolutely stacked squad, top to bottom. I'll be starting basically Josh Allen and Jimmy Garoppolo, who those are guys I drafted, but I've got Leonard Fournette, I've got Zeke, I've got Aaron Jones, which isn't as great as it was back in the day when I traded for him. But I've managed to collect Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, and then I still have Travis Kelce and 2 other tight ends. So basically, I made 1 trade to get some picks this year, because I'm one that I like to be involved and have some picks. So traded Jalen Hurd for 311 and 406, I think. And so I came out of that draft with Devin Duvernay and Adam Troutman. And so it's a tight end premium league. So because I have Kelce, I'm not really super worried about the tight ends right now. So I basically took my number 1 tight end for fantasy at the 406. So I was like thrilled with that as a haul. Like, to me, I got an upside wide receiver, and I got basically my tight end 1, and I only had 2 picks, and they were both, basically right at the end of the draft. So I'm pretty stoked with that. The other league I was in, total opposite. I basically tore it down last year, said, you know what, I can't compete. I can't win. I'm kind of right in the middle, and I don't like to be there. I knew that this 2020 class was going to be pretty stout up top. So I basically said, I'm going to trade everything away, but I'm going to make one position really strong while I do it. So that position ended up being wide receivers. I ended up with, some pretty good wide receivers. But I had the first pick, the second pick. I traded, and the 9th and 10th pick when I started, and I ended up with Jonathan Taylor, Joe Burrow. I traded the 9th pick and Tyler Lockett to move up and grab J.K. Dobbins, and then I took Cam Akers at 10. So my first 4 rookie picks, I basically restacked my running back core. I mean, I've got 3 great running backs there, and I got another quarterback who I can then, build around. And then I made some deals that I was really stoked about. I traded the 203 and Cortland Sutton for Chris Godwin, which I thought was just an absolute slam dunk pick. I don't think Sutton's going to be as good this year just from a volume perspective as he was last year, because he's not going to be the only guy there.
Right.
And Chris Godwin is. I mean, Chris Godwin is still going to be a stud with Tom Brady. Chris Godwin might even be better. And then I actually traded Drew Lock, which is why I always say take quarterbacks in the second round, because they increase in value almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I traded Drew Lock, the 203 and a first next year, and got Russell Wilson. And then I just took Cole Kmet at the 403, and I traded up. I traded a third next year so that I could get my boy Josh Kelly, who's my favorite late round running back in this class, at the 311. So I am stoked with how that rebuild has gone.
Hell yeah, man.
I still have basically all my picks for next year too, which is great. This is exactly what I wanted, because I'm competing. I had a 1 year rebuild basically. So 2 totally different strategies, 2 totally different leagues. But I'm pretty thrilled with how both those rookie drafts have gone so far.
That's the coolest thing about this year's rookie draft is that, I mean, if you did it artfully, you could have a 1 year rebuild with this entire draft class.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk about that, like 4th round, you can get an Adam Troutman. I mean, that's absolutely killer value for a tight end who I think might have immediate production in the NFL and not even have to wait for that 3-year window that we usually see for tight ends. Yep. So why don't you tell them a little bit about what's going on with the injury guide if they haven't gotten to hear about it yet? I've been tweeting about it. I threw out some praise for it because I just think it's such an awesome product. But why don't you give them a little bit of what that's about?
Yeah, so I'll start with my background. So actually, I talk about fantasy football and dynasty football, but I do it from a medical perspective. I do have a doctorate in physical therapy. I basically run 2 sports clinics during the day, so I kind of live it a little bit. It's not nearly to the professional athlete level that some people do, but for me, where I am geographically, this is as close as I'm going to get to training athletes all day, which is pretty sweet. But basically, the last 3 years, I've collected injury history data for incoming rookies. I used to put it in a guide with Dynasty 101, that injury history data. And this year, I just decided, you know what? If I'm going to put all the time into it, I don't have as much free time as I did when I was in school. I actually just graduated last year. So I said, you know what? I don't have as much time as I had before. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try to make it my own thing. I'm really going to try to make this a unique, basically, I call it a supplement guide, because the goal when I made it was to supplement whatever rookie guide you want to get. So I know you guys just dropped one, which is awesome. I have it on my computer right now, which is really pretty impressive.
Thank you, man.
My goal was for my injury guide, to put new information into people's hands that they're not going to be able to get anywhere else. And what that is basically the injury histories from a medical perspective, how serious the injuries are. And then I've created basically a mathematical equation. I mean, it's much more in depth. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but basically it's a formula that I use to assess player risk across each position. So I have offensive and defensive players. I got about 100 players histories right now. Each player takes me about an hour to do. So if you just do the math, I mean, that's 100 players times an hour a piece. I mean, you're looking at about 100 hours worth of work for this guide. And the reason it's so important, and I think the reason that if you're listening or watching this, the reason you should go invest and go and pay the $10 to get it is because, 1, you're saving yourself a ton of time. 2, it's the same thing that NFL teams are doing when they're doing medicals at the combine. They're looking for things that could be a potential red flag for these guys. So if you don't have the injury history data in front of you, and the only place you can get it is here with this guide, you're missing a piece that the NFL is using and you should be using in Dynasty.
Exactly.
The third reason is that you should go get it is basically it's gorgeous.
It
My
is.
wife
It
is
is
a
great.
graphic designer. We were talking about this before we started recording. She is designed basically, this is not your, average, just normal publication. This is like a legitimate professional looking guide. I mean, it's actually, every time I look at it, I'm like, holy crap, this is ridiculous. I should put her name on it, not mine. From just a visual perspective, I think it makes it much easier to go through the players and see where their weak points are. I talk about this a lot. The biggest reason that I do these injury histories is for my own personal gain, because it's the best predictor that we have of future injury in the NFL. I call them weak points. It's the points where if a player gets hurt in the future, it's probably going to be somewhere they've already been hurt in the past.
Right.
But if you're going into the NFL and you're going into your rookie drafts and you're taking guys and you don't know where that risk is, you're missing a huge component that could screw you down the road. The two examples I always give, the first year that I did this, I was ranking running backs. And I was looking at two guys, Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey. And this was like a huge debate in the Dynasty community. Okay, who is the 101 here? And after I did the injury history, I said, you know what? Talent-wise, two incredible running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Christian McCaffrey has never been hurt, ever.
No.
Leonard Fournette is coming in with some baggage. He's got some ankles that aren't, not the greatest. This could be an issue where if both of them stay healthy, probably pretty even from a talent perspective. Now, obviously, someone's going to be like Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette when they were coming out of school.
Oh,
from a
yeah.
talent perspective, very close.
Oh, I remember I took Christian McCaffrey with the 101 that year.
Yeah.
And it was a wildly controversial decision in my league. Everybody was calling me an idiot for taking him over Fournette. And I mean, obviously it's paid dividends in the long run, but when they were coming out, it was a razor thin margin with even Fournette being on the side where everybody was like clear 101. They were talking about generational talent stuff.
Yeah. And so for me, when I was doing my rankings, that's actually what put Christian McCaffrey at 101 was the injury history. If I didn't have that data, I probably would have went with Leonard Fournette. I did end up with Christian. I traded up for Christian McCaffrey to three or four spot anywhere he fell in any dynasty league that I had. And I mean, he's the 101 player in dynasty right now. So clearly that was the correct decision. That's not to say that Leonard Fournette isn't going to be successful.
Right.
My thing is that knowing that information is the difference between possibly getting a Christian McCaffrey and one of the best players on the planet right now, and getting a guy that is still very talented, but has not been as consistent as what you want. There are many years, I mean, last year being an exception, but before that, we were talking about Leonard Fournette being maybe a guy that like we can't trust in dynasty. I mean, we're talking 4th, 5th round startup pick because he just couldn't stay healthy, and so there was a precursor to that. And who knows, maybe he doesn't stay healthy this year and we're having that same conversation at the end of this year. We don't know for sure. But what I can tell you is that Christian McCaffrey is paying off huge because I knew that injury history. The other guy, this one is a little bit more, I would say not controversial because I don't think that this was as hotly debated. But I had Nick Chubb as my RB2 behind Saquon Barkley. And the problem I had with Chubb's history, and some people will probably remember, the dude had like a horrific knee injury in college. When I did the history data and I go back and I find everything I can on these injuries to know exactly what happened, exactly what was damaged, what's weak, what is going to be an issue down the road, because it makes a difference. And so what I found was, one, Sony Michel was not a perfect prospect who was kind of debated as like that number 2 guy. He had a lot of injuries that, one, he tore his ACL in high school. Nobody talked about it until I started talking about it. And then all of a sudden, I think 2 or 3 people picked up on it, but it was still not a very well-known fact that he tore his ACL in high school. which we know leads to knee injuries in the future. Look at example, Todd Gurley, except that Michel's was in high school. So those issues start basically right as soon as he starts his NFL career. We've seen it now twice. He's had 2 meniscus issues. He's had, not saying he's not talented, but he's not exactly what you expected coming out of school.
Well, and that's something that I found so interesting with your report is talking about. It's something that if you're not looking at it from that angle, you'd never actually think about. But when they're in high school, they're not getting this collegiate level, like, future NFL prospect kind of surgical care. You're going to your local hospital to have this stuff done. Yeah. And you don't think about like the quality of the repair that they're getting. You just think, oh, he had that injury. We've seen people come back from ACL tears, but there's levels to this shit,
It's a huge, I tell everybody there's good and bad versions of every profession out there. There are good surgeons out there and there are not good surgeons out there. It's just the nature of the beast. I mean, some people do a great job and they're incredibly talented at what they do. And some people do the same job, but they don't do it to the same level. And so, yeah, that is a huge concern. When you see ACL tear in high school, who knows where he went to go get that surgery? It could have been, some C-rated doctor from, the city next to him. He didn't even, who knows? His parents probably weren't thinking about NFL career. They were probably just hoping, oh, well, we need to keep him on a scholarship.
Right.
And so that's always important to know if there's something major. And I do go back to high school if I can find it. If it's major and they were a major recruit, it's probably in the guide already. I won't say that I collect everything because I can't figure out, like, some people probably tear their ACL when they're in Pee Wee football. It's not as common, but it happens. I will tell you that most people that are tearing their ACLs in Pee Wee football, they're not getting recruited because it's such a major injury, and they're not in the mentality or the mindset to train the way that maybe a high school senior is that's trying to get onto a scholarship, or a college player is that's trying to get to the NFL. It's a different kind of mentality in junior high. So, but I haven't found, closest I found freshman year. That's the farthest back injury I've been able to find. That's in this guide. But Nick Chubb, back to that, because I think it's a really interesting story. Major knee injury in college. Everyone coming out, when he came out, everyone was like, man, we got to be concerned about this knee injury because it was super gruesome. It was on national television. He was a stud that got hurt. Basically, his knee kind of exploded. But when I went back and researched and really looked into it, his ACL was still intact, which is incredibly rare that you tear all 3 of the 4 major knee ligaments, but your ACL stays intact. That's not a very common injury, but it's huge when you're talking about future injury risk, because of the 4, the ACL can't repair itself. It has no blood flow. And so because it doesn't have a blood supply, when it's damaged, it has to be repaired and replaced. It doesn't heal, but it won't heal unless you basically reconstruct it with a graft.
Right.
The other 3, the LCL doesn't do as well, but the MCL and PCL, they found with MRI results, once they repair them, they can be back to the strength, and they basically, you can't even tell that you tore them, really? 3 to 4 years later. I mean, it's really incredible how well we heal those parts of the body because they get a great blood supply. Huh. So because his ACL was intact, his injury history wasn't as concerning as a guy like Michel, who had multiple other issues on top of just the ACL tear, but he had multiple things in his history. So I was saying, dude, shut up about Nick Chubb's injury. That is in the past, and we're not worried about that because his ACL was intact.
Right.
That you're going to get that in this guide. You're going to get that kind of differentiation, because if you're watching the video, you're going to say what I said when I watched the video. Holy crap, that's brutal. That is not a good injury. But once you dig into it and you have basically the medical knowledge to understand the difference, then you realize, holy crap, that's actually not as big of a deal as what I thought it was based on the video, even though it looked terrible.
Right.
So that, I think, is a huge benefit that you get from this guide. And of course, we're updating it. My plan is to basically update it throughout the summer. This isn't like hey, thanks for your it's $10, by the way, which is ridiculously cheap. you, you're getting an update. So it's not like I'm just dropping it. And, you get your pre-draft, your post, now I guess post-draft version. Okay, we'll see you next year. Thanks for the $10. My plan is to add players to this, fill in the gaps. I want to have basically the whole first 3 rounds covered. I had almost all of the first round, except the freaking Raiders took Damon Arnett, which was a terrible pick, but it doesn't really matter except unless you play IDP. And I think there was like 3 or 4 guys in the second round that I didn't get to, but for the most part, everybody's already in there. All the top guys are in there for sure. It's 101 pages long. I mean, the thing is, it's a beast.
It's beefy.
But you're paying $1 for 10 pages basically, which is, I mean, I can't, if what I just went through doesn't convince you to buy the guide, nothing I say will. So we should just move on with the rest of the show, because I really do think this is so unique in the fantasy community, and it has been so well done. I take a lot of pride in making sure that this thing is, nobody will question the quality. Once they get it in their hands and they actually see what it is, they're going to be absolutely stunned.
Well, I completely agree, man. I mean, looking at when you start to think about it from, like the pay perspective and all that stuff, there's stuff that I have paid for across, like redraft, dynasty, all that has just paled in comparison to the uniqueness of this. You can go find a lot of the information if you dig hard enough and you scan Twitter and you want to get on the right websites. You can find the stuff that you can get from some of these subscription services. You're not going to be able to find the same insight that you have from your career perspective and from the work that you've done to be able to compile all this information. And like I said, that perspective of talking about high school injuries, that's something that I've never seen, and I will probably never see again outside of your guide. So it's just a wholeheartedly unique take on it that I think is fully worth the price.
Yeah, I mean, the example I use, and I don't think he'll care if I name drop him here, but basically the Pro Football Doc, most people know who Pro Football Doc is. His name's David Chow. He was the head doc for the Los Angeles Chargers for 17 years. He's probably the most well-known medical professional in the football world. He pays for this guide. And so if it's good enough for him, like, I promise you will be impressed with this. That tells me, that tells you how important this information is, that he will buy it from me, just because, he sees the value in it too, with what he does, which is, the pinnacle of what I want to aspire to do. But I won't ever be a orthopedic surgeon. So, the fact that he pays basically to have this data tells you how important it is. Because he wouldn't have reached out and would not be in contact with me if he didn't think it was important. And that is basically the best stamp of approval that I have on this thing. Like, there is nothing else I can say.
I think that says it all right there. So let's jump into the stuff that we're going to go over today. Post-draft, we know the landing spots now. We've got an idea with how the landscape is going to look like for the 2020 season. And we're just going to kind of go over 3 surprise landing spots that we have for players that we didn't anticipate going to the places that they ended up. And the first one that we're going to start off with, man, and you were talking about your Aaron Jones shares suffering earlier, is A.J. Dillon, man. I did not see this one coming to the Packers. They really shit the bed.
They did. It was a pretty bad draft for them overall. I saw something where somebody said that LaFleur took Jordan Love, which is another terrible landing spot. Took him because he was trying to show Aaron Rodgers that they could move on without him. I don't know, but it sounded to me like he was drafting just to spite Aaron Rodgers, which is not a recipe for success.
You don't get into pissing contests with your draft picks.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It just seems stupid to me. A.J. Dillon, though, man, it sucks because I really do think that he could be really a really good fantasy running back in the right system with the right type of offense built around him. I just hate that he has to do it at the expense of Aaron Jones, who I think is also a very good running back that has not gotten. Every time he gets the chance to be an elite running back, he does it. He's hyper efficient. He can catch passes. Okay, he's not the greatest in pass pro, but let me tell you, AJ Dillon is not the greatest in pass pro either. Nope. So to me, this was a pick. This was a team that I think looked at what the Tennessee Titans did last year. They have a great offensive line. They basically just bully you into submission. So by the third or fourth quarter, you're just like, oh my gosh, dude, please stop smacking me with this 250-pound beast of a man in Derrick Henry. And they looked at A.J. Dillon and said, you know what? We don't have a beast in our backfield that's just going to punish people all day. So we're going to go get A.J. Dillon, and he's going to be like our ramrod. And I just think that's bad process. I mean, running back, we can talk about it being a devalued position across the board, but I just felt like for what this team needed, what they gave their offense with A.J. Dillon, it's not going to equate to more wins, at least I don't think. All it does is hurt everyone for fantasy. It hurts Dillon and it hurts Aaron Jones, who I still think viable fantasy asset. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes, which may actually be more efficient for Aaron Jones, because I do think he is developing into and maybe this lights a fire under Aaron Jones. And you know what? He says, you know what? Screw you, man. Like, I don't need this dude coming into my space. I just scored like 20 touchdowns last year. I don't need this. I'm over it. I'm going to freaking bust my butt, and you're going to have to pay me because I'm going to be so dang good that you're not going to take me off the field. That's what I'm hoping for as an Aaron Jones owner.
Right. Yeah.
This is bad, man.
Yeah. When I'm looking at it though, so I know that there are certain people out there who are super high on A.J. Dillon, and I'm kind of a hybrid between looking at numbers and watching tape. I have a little bit of knowledge, from watching film and all that stuff. So I've got my microcosm of like a little bit of college football that I played. But so when I'm watching that, man, A.J. Dillon is just the definite, because I know that he keeps like the Titans comparison and the Derrick Henry. But when you're talking about Derrick Henry is smacking people in the mouth, like you said, in quarter 3, quarter 4, when he's wearing down the defenses. But A.J. Dillon, he seems to fade throughout the game. He has his strongest quarters in quarter 1, quarter 2, and he fades in the 3rd and 4th. He's kind of one of those guys to me that looks like Tarzan but plays like Jane,
Yeah, and I think that is, I think that's fair. I always tell people I'm not a film guy I'm an injury guy, but I still do a lot of Dynasty. I'm more of a collector of information at this point.
Right.
I got film dudes that I love to listen to and take their opinions. I got deep analytic dudes that I like to take their information from. I think we're probably pretty similar in that regard. Sounds like you kind of take a similar approach.
Right.
But that's the thing that kills me. I'm looking for dudes that both sides like. Analytics guys, they're liking the fact that he's, rushed for 1,000 yards at Boston College 3 straight years. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Taylor rushed for 2,000 yards for 3 straight years, but we won't talk about the difference in the class right in a second. But the film guys are the ones that I think are pointing out the biggest flaws with Dillon. Just like you said, you would expect someone like him to be built for 4 quarters of just beating the snot out of you. And and you're not the first person I've heard say he isn't really playing like that at Boston College. He's more of a, like a, I don't know of animal I can compare him to. Short burst, and then he fades out. I don't know if I'm trying to think. I feel like hippos are pretty fast all the time. Like I imagine if a hippo is chasing you, like eventually he'd be like, all right, dude, I'm over this. That's kind of how A.J. Dillon plays. So
right.
That is a concern for sure.
Yeah, man. I just like I said the other day, I was in a mock draft where I actually, contrary to what I just said, I drafted him because we were doing a whole startup draft and he got picked to the Packers. So I was like, fuck it, I'll take him right here. Yeah. And somebody was talking about it, and I was like, listen, I don't like AJ Dillon. If I needed help moving furniture, I'd call AJ Dillon up. But if I'm needing help punching in on the 1 yard line, I don't know, man. I might go Aaron Jones. I'm just saying, numbers talk volumes, and he put up the red zone touchdowns last year.
Well, yeah, and to me, in this, again, I feel like from the little tape study that I do, it looked like when he was breaking off big runs, he didn't have that initial speed. The first 10 yards I didn't feel like were particularly fast. Now, obviously, I know he had a ridiculous speed score for his size.
Yeah,
but I never really saw that. In the NFL, you have to be able to basically burst. It's not so much straight line speed is great, But the dudes that are succeeding, your Alvin Kamara's of the world, even a Derrick Henry, they get to top speed very quickly. Derrick Henry is a 3-step top speed guy.
Right.
He takes 3 steps, he's as fast as he's going to go. And at that size, that's a ton of force, and it's hard to take down at that point. I don't know if I see that quite yet with what Dylan has shown, both on tape and just in general. From what I've heard from people that know way more about the tape study than I do, they're not seeing that burst either.
Well, yeah, so I think that we're kind of in agreement on this. Is that I think that AJ Dillon inevitably is going to hurt Aaron Jones' stock. I think that they're going to give him the chance to show what he's worth. I mean, you don't draft a 6-foot-tall, 247-pound back who's known for being a bruiser and not put him in on goal line situations. But I think that we're kind of both on the same page here that, like, he's going to have to prove it. I think that Aaron Jones' stock doesn't take the hit that everybody else is anticipating until we've actually seen the proof in the pudding out there on the field.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, let's go on to the next one, surprise landing spot. CeeDee Lamb, I don't think that CD didn't expect it. I don't think that Jerry expected it. I damn sure know that none of the analysts, I never saw CeeDee Lamb go into the freaking Cowboys once in any mock draft I ever watched.
No, and he kind of fell. I mean, we were expecting him to be 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And then and then once those teams passed up, I was kind of like, okay, is CeeDee Lamb going to fall to somewhere that is not the greatest landing spot for him? And sure enough, Dallas, while I will say that I don't think Dallas is a bad landing spot for any wide receiver, because at least they have a good quarterback. They've got a decent offensive line. They've lost a couple pieces this year that I think will hurt them from a line perspective, but they have a good running back. They've got a good offense around him. It's not the best. I mean, you were hoping for a place like the Jets, someplace that he's going to get 120 targets plus immediately. And obviously that didn't happen. With Lamb, I like the fit from a football perspective. I love the fit. I think the Cowboys look really good. I mean, really good.
Right.
I was a huge Michael Gallup. I had Michael Gallup in my top 12 players the year he came out. I just thought that he just had it. He was just he was a beast. And so obviously you got Amari Cooper. You just paid him. So I don't think he's going anywhere soon.
Well, the good thing that I saw about Amari Cooper's contract is that apparently after 2021, there's no more guaranteed money on the contract. So we've got 2 more years of, guaranteed they're not going to get rid of Amari Cooper. But at that, 2022, we're talking 3 years into his wide receiver, career at Dallas. We could see that pop with the absence of Amari Cooper.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you're playing for in Dynasty, especially. I feel like Dak Prescott has to be thrilled. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was my number 1 wide receiver going into the draft.
Might as well.
I think he's supremely talented, especially yards after the catch. Even though I don't feel like he's necessarily the quickest or fastest player, when he has the ball in his hands, people just can't tackle him. It's a trait that I don't know how you quantify it, but I see it with Alvin Kamara a lot too, where it's like, okay, why does he make people look so silly? It's not like he's, it doesn't seem like he's moving incredibly fast.
Right.
We know he doesn't have Tyreek Hill speed, but yet when he moves and does his little dance jig, which I think he does exceptionally well, dudes just miss. They just do not tackle him. So I think they're gonna move Cooper in, or maybe play Cooper in and alternate him with Gallup. I think CeeDee Lamb's going to be basically on the outside, and I think he's going to end up with a pretty fair target share. I mean, I could see him getting 90 to 100 targets the first year and being pretty productive with him. I mean, 1,000-yard season definitely isn't out of the question. This team does pass more than it used to. I mean, you still got Zeke, so touchdown upside I feel like is a little bit limited in the red zone, but I really feel like CeeDee Lamb is a dude that's going to have 5, 6, 7 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown quite a few weeks this year. So I don't hate it for fantasy, but it definitely was surprising because I really felt like being the number 1 wide receiver on my board, I would have expected him to go to one of these teams that don't have anybody
Right.
on offense. The Cowboys, I feel like Jerry was like making that pick from his super yacht, just like, watch this. Like,
Yeah.
Dak's going to complain about his contract. We're going to make him the best quarterback on the planet.
It's the
And I think they're
definition
gonna
of
win that
everything
window.
Jerry Jones. It's the definition of everything Jerry Jones. It's just like an overabundance of wealth, you know?
Yeah.
Like I've got all the wide receivers because I can, because it's Jerry land, you know?
Yeah. And here's the thing, too. I do think that if we think about this from just a business perspective, the Super Bowl window is now, and they have Dak. You know, I guess technically they could tag him again. And so, or pay the man. You drafted him, pay him.
Right.
Everybody else gets money, but Dak doesn't get paid. Anyway, that's stupid. But you're just going to help his case that he's worth $40 million if you give him more weapons. Anyway, I do think that Dak is the biggest winner with this CD addition, but I think that offense is going to be probably one of the 3 or 4 best, highest scoring offenses in the league if everything stays the way that it currently is.
Right. I mean, that's the big thing when you start talking about the addition of these like elite weapons, because we've seen these super teams try and form before with like all of these offensive weapons that come together, and sometimes they just don't meld, Yeah. And so, I mean, the hope is that we can see production from everybody, I mean, Dak Prescott getting all of these weapons, pulling coverage from everybody raises all ships, but sometimes that's not always the case. But the good thing is that we're seeing we're seeing Jason Witten vacate 83 targets there. And I know that you can't automatically give targets to a new wide receiver that comes into it, because like we talked about on previous podcasts, Eitan Mosier said that, it's a skill set to be able to acquire those targets. But if there was ever a person that had that skill set, it's definitely going to be CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I still think he's a good fantasy pick. I lean running backs in most of my dynasty drafts. Just like I described earlier when I was just collecting them in my rebuild. But I don't think CeeDee Lamb is a bad pick by any stretch.
No. I don't think there's any scenario where you could go wrong with selecting him. In our draft guide, I'm double checking right here, but I think that we have him in our tier 3. He's pulling up the bottom of our tier 3. We personally like, Jalen Reagor, and I like Jerry Jeudy's upside a little bit better than I like CeeDee Lamb's for maybe at least the short-term period, that 2-year window that we were talking about. But the long-term, I mean, CeeDee is the leaps and bounds best talent, in my opinion. Let's go on to our next surprising landing spot, and that comes to, our big-bodied wide receiver and Bryan Edwards. He goes to Oakland, and I mean, with the amount of talent that they're acquiring over there, I did not see them trying to nab him in that round.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there. They went a little wide receiver heavy in this draft. I mean, with Edwards especially, I thought he was a great wide receiver. Definitely a question mark for me, just from an injury perspective. I'm looking through the database here. Edwards has 6 basically recorded injuries. So all the injuries, in case anybody's like, how does he get these injuries? Every injury in my database has a source. So you can go find it too if you don't believe me, but trust me, you're wasting your time. I've done the research. I've got the source there. It's a real thing.
Right.
He's got 6 injuries. 4 of the 6 I deemed as either a moderate or severe injury, which is basically my ranking of how serious this injury is for his re-injury risk in the future.
Okay.
That is all explained in the guide too. It's in the first, I think it's like the second page. But anyway, scored a 7.5 on my injury risk rating. That's an injury. The injury risk rating is a rating that each player gets based on their injury history, the best predictor we have of future injury. It's a formula that's designed with a variety of factors included. How long ago was the injury? What type of injury was it? Is it a repeated injury that's happened before? So now this is even a weaker point. There's a ton of factors go into that. But basically the way that this scored out for him was a 7.5. 7.5 is a high injury risk for the future. And so we saw this, I think, impact his draft stock because a lot of people were talking about him maybe being a second round, a day 2 pick in the second round before he had his last 2 injuries, which was a meniscus tear that he had surgery on. That was in 2019. He did end up, having surgery on that. And I think, and this is me speculating, I think what happened is he had that meniscus tear at the end of the season. He finally got cleared to train for the NFL Combine. So he started training super hard and eventually developed a stress fracture in his foot while he was trying to basically overtrain for the Combine because he was behind because of the meniscus injury.
Right.
2 injuries leading up to the draft is never a good thing for a player's draft capital. The fact that the Raiders still took him in the third, basically the beginning of the 3rd round, is a good indicator of what they think of him as a player. Because with something like that, you would expect the player to fall maybe even, I was thinking maybe even the 4th round for a guy like Edwards, just because he's a little bit older. Who knows if they're going to, they haven't been able to, this is a weird year because they haven't been able to basically bring him in and see how the injuries are developing, which adds a whole new wrinkle to injury analysis because who knows what they're going to do. But I thought Edwards was talent. I mean, I think he's a talented wide receiver, but I am always a little bit more risk averse. The nice thing about Edwards, at least in the 2 drafts I've done, I feel like he's going into a spot where his injury risk is baked into the price you're paying in rookie drafts, which is you have to get an injury discount if you're going to pay for a player that has a significant injury history. And so Edwards falls into that category for me. He's going, late 2nd, early 3rd. He would have probably been an early 2nd round pick in rookie drafts had he not had the last 2 injuries. So, to me, that's pretty good value.
Yeah, one thing that I find so polarizing about him is that, we all talk about the breakout age for these wide receivers. And so on one end of the spectrum, he had a 17.8-year-old breakout age, which is just crazy.
That's freaky.
Yeah, it shows how adaptable he is, the level of athlete that he is, all of those things. But then the other side of it that we look at that might seem like a positive at first, but then kind of becomes a negative in my mind, is that he had a 48.4% dominator rating, which is great. That's a great number. But what scares me about that is that Edwards he put up good collegiate numbers, but they weren't blowing you off the page. It was, mid 800s with 6 or 7 touchdowns and 60 or 70 receptions, if I remember right. And so when you start talking about him commanding that much of a target share with that many of the receptions and all that stuff, then we start to look at what they acquired in Oakland. And so now they've got Henry Ruggs, they've got Darren Waller. He's got to compete with Tyrell Williams, and he's got to compete with Josh Jacobs out of the backfield. If he's not going to be able to get that huge target share like he's used to and command that much of the offense, I wonder how big of a weapon he's actually going to be, or if he's just going to be there to draw coverages.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, and this, I'm sad that we're already to this point. I question every decision that the Raiders make from a draft perspective. Who knows if it wasn't the Raiders picking him, he may have fallen to day 3.
Right.
We've seen them make now in the last 2 years with this regime that's in charge of the Raiders. We've seen them make some pretty questionable decisions as far as player personnel and who they draft and when they draft them. So for me, it's the fact is he did get taken in the early 3rd, so we can't just say, well, he'd speculate that maybe he goes 2 more picks later. Who knows?
Right.
I personally can bake that into his price. Like I said, I like where he's going in rookie drafts right now. It's not like people are banging the door for him to be in the early 2nd.
Right.
Price is fine for what you're getting. I question, was the value, are they seeing something that maybe isn't there with this guy because they do have a very unique way of evaluating players that I just don't. Very contrarian.
That's a kind of word, unique. We'll go with that one.
Very contrarian to what the majority of very smart people would do. So I don't think, I don't want to say John Gruden isn't a good coach, but I don't think that he was the right coach for this situation, for this team. I don't think he's a coach that necessarily rebuilds well, and he was out of the game for so long that I have a hard time really believing in him. Like, it seems like it's almost a gimmick right now, and I don't do gimmicks when it comes to head coaches.
Well, and the one thing, I mean, there's a lot to love about Brian Edwards. I mean, you go watch his highlight reel, and it's just amazing contested catch after amazing contested catch. But one thing that we've talked about on the show before is that the only way that you're a great contested catch wide receiver is if you're not able to make that space, if you're not running routes and you're not getting that separation. And the other thing that we noticed from him is that he has zero to offer after the catch, it seems. Seems like while he can fight and he's big bodied and all that stuff, once you get the ball in his hands, he's not, like you were talking about with CeeDee Lamb, where he just makes people look stupid out there. He's not doing that. And so, I mean, I guess hopefully the idea is that they brought that, yards after catch guy in with Henry Ruggs, and then you just throw up prayers to Brian Edwards and hope that the game plan works. But that's not a recipe for, a top 24 wide receiver, in my opinion, is just a guy that you throw up prayers to.
Yeah, I would agree. And I just don't, to me, the price is fine. But I just don't trust it. Let's put it that way. I just don't trust what they're doing over there. But no, Edwards is a fine player, but I just can't. I can't. Every time he's on the board, I'm like, man, I'd rather have somebody else right here.
I find myself in that same position. Yeah, so, but let's go on to three not surprising but ideal landing spots that we've got, and we'll just start it off with the number one. The favorite, my Chiefs. Let's go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at Kansas City. I mean, you could not have walked into a better landing spot than that.
No, you can't. This is, and I'll be totally transparent here. I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire as my number 5 running back.
Me too.
Off of basically pre-draft. This is why I say you don't know anything before the draft happens, because obviously now, I mean, this is a perfect landing spot for him. I don't question anything about the landing spot. I don't question anything about Helaire. I do think he's very talented. This is the best case scenario for him specifically. Right. He needed a spot where he is going to come in and be basically a pass catching back that occasionally has to run between the tackles, kind of like what he was doing at LSU, where he was highly effective. Mm-hmm. I worry that the speed actually isn't going to be enough. He's a very shifty guy. Mm-hmm. You can't dance the same way you did at LSU.
Very true.
You just can't. You can't do that in the NFL. We've seen it time and time again where you have to basically decide you're going to run and run, and do it very quickly. You get maybe 1 or 2 cuts max. If you start dancing, you're going to go David Montgomery level, and it's not going to be good for you. Very few players can do what Lev Bell was doing when he was with the Steelers in terms of just like sitting and waiting for a play to show up in front of him. I don't think they're going to make Edwards-Helaire do that. That's why it's a perfect fit. They're just going to basically swing him out wide. Good luck defending, all the weapons they already have downfield. And he is the safety valve. And that safety valve position for the Chiefs could be, I mean, it very well could be 1,600 yards total with 60 balls caught. He could have 800 yards receiving as basically a first-year player. Mm-hmm. And that would be, nobody would even bat an eye at that in that offense. And so you have to take him. I mean, you have to take him in rookie drafts. You can't, even if you do think he's the 5th most talented running back, you can't ignore the fact that he is the dude there. They picked him. The coach loves him. Pat Mahomes apparently loved him.
Yep.
He gets all the checks. Everybody loved him. And so if you're going to be cute in rookie drafts, this is not the dude to be cute with. Even if you don't think he was the most talented back, you have to adjust to this.
Right.
You just have to. And so to me, I have him as my RB2, but just because I think Jonathan Taylor is elite.
Yeah.
But I don't have any red flags. There's no red flags across the board. I think he's a B+ player all the way across the board in an A++ offense. So he's going to be elite. He's probably should be my 101 From a running back perspective, I like Jonathan Taylor's landing spot as well. So
it's hard
there's
to
no
do
wrong answer between those two. You're gonna have a stud either way.
Yeah, when you have an elite running back, because I completely agree with you there. Jonathan Taylor was my 101. Going into the pre-draft rankings, he was my number one running back off the board. And so when you look at the landing spots, I mean, the Colts have a better offensive line than the Chiefs do. Now it's a debate between offensive line and offensive scheme. Those are the different things that you have to look at when you're dealing with those. And I mean, one of the things that you said is you're right. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have some growing pains with the shiftiness that he tried to do at LSU, not translating into the NFL, because he does try and get cute back there, and you just cannot do that at the next level, especially with an offensive line like the Chiefs have. It's not the worst in the NFL, but it's certainly not the best.
Yeah, and the Chiefs did kill it. They did. I mean, you're a Chiefs fan, correct?
Yes.
What I heard
from Kansas City.
So I no offensive linemen are included in my injury guide, but I did collect data on a few offensive linemen. Like I said, this guide goes to some very important people. They have some very important needs. So I did include some offensive linemen. One of those dudes was actually a Chiefs pick by the name of Lucas Niang, who's coming off a hip labral surgery, but is a very talented tackle. Mm-hmm. So that offensive line could get, a pretty nice little bump there. That I thought they stole him in the NFL draft. I had a second round grade on him. I think they got him in the third. And so, good teams just do good things. That's why you question the Raiders and you don't question the Chiefs. So that offensive line might not be as bad, but like you said, I do have a few concerns that he might get a little cute his first year, and that's not what I hope that that's not the case. I still think he's going to be a huge cog in that offense. And there's, from a fantasy perspective, like, this is best case scenario. So like, we're really pulling it, we're splitting hairs here between those two dudes.
Right. Well, I mean, we've said pretty much everything we can say about him. Great landing spot, B+ player. And we expect good things moving forward. But then we'll go to another ideal landing spot like you were talking about earlier, where you wanted CeeDee Lamb to go someplace like the Jets where he could receive 120 targets right out the gate. We got Denzel Mims up on the board, one of my guys. I love Denzel Mims, and I'm a huge fan of this landing spot, Adam Gase aside.
Yeah, this class is unreal. First two rounds. I mean, the fact that I'm seeing Denzel Mims go at 207, 29, mid to late second round, just because there's so many dudes that people like in front of him. I mean, that's freaky. You don't get very many of these. Denzel Mims has excelled basically at every level of the entire process. He's big, he's fast. There's, again, a dude that even if you don't love everything, he has a few issues with drops, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he had a 12% drop rate, I think, his senior year,
which isn't great. But I also feel like that's something that we look into too much. We look into drops too much. NFL teams get on these players. They know how to coach out drops. At least the good ones do. I don't know if Adam Gase does, but I'm sure somebody on his staff will help him work on that. And it doesn't matter. If you get in 120 plus targets as a rookie, you can go through, some growing pains from a catching perspective. The fact is, you have the best opportunity to immediately become and establish yourself as the team's number one option in the pass game. It's the first time in 2+ years that the team has invested anything into Sam Darnold's success. So we don't know what Sam Darnold could be with a team that's even possibly competent offensively.
Yeah, the weapons that he's had around him are so subpar.
Yeah, I mean, they were terrible all around him. Every offensive player around him besides Lev Bell is terrible. The offensive line was terrible. Sam Darnold hasn't had a chance to succeed, and he's like 22. So let's not give up on a 22-year-old. He was one of the youngest quarterbacks ever to be drafted when he came into the league. Let's give him some weapons and see if he maybe is good. Maybe he is something here. But I love Mims. I think he's exactly what that offense needed. They did get Bashard Perriman, which I thought was kind of a low key pickup for them. I thought that was fine. You still got, why do I always forget this guy's name? Jamison Crowder. So you still have Jamison Crowder playing out of the slot. So now, I would call it like a C plus lineup. You know, there's no one. This is like your Madden team the first year after you strip everything down, and you're like just trying to get through the games. Like you got some wide receivers that are okay, but they're not great. Like 70s across the board here. But that's okay. Like at least he has something that he can build with now from from an offensive perspective. And for fantasy, dude, Denzel Mims a freak. You know, who cares if he's not? You know, who cares if he drops a few passes? He's going to get 120 targets. He has the best chance to succeed immediately. We always talk about wide receivers taking forever from a fantasy perspective. I don't think we see that with Mims. I mean, I think if you're in the second round and you need a dude that's going to start playing for you as your wide receiver 3 like today, you need to go grab Denzel Mims, because I think of all the wide receivers, he's probably the one I'm the most confident in playing week 1 and being viable for fantasy.
One, the best thing about Mims is we were kind of talking about the shortcomings of Bryan Edwards earlier, you know, and how his route running ability like sometimes leaves something to the imagination because he's not getting that separation. Then I understand that Mims isn't the most refined route runner in this class, but some of the stuff that he has, he reminds me of like, you know, you get an IKEA piece and you've got all the bolts and the boards and all that stuff, and you got it all there. You just have to put it together. Mims has all of the pieces to be an elite big man in the NFL. He's just got to put all those puzzle pieces together. And I think that he's closer to it than we would anticipate. And I mean, his catch ability when it's not an obvious catch, because he's got that 12% drop rate on dumbass catches. Like you go out there and watch him and he's making these circus catches, but then he makes a concentration drop, letting it get into his pads. And so, I mean, just everything that he does excites me. And so seeing him get to be paired up with somebody in Sam Darnold, who I've been holding on to on my, not holding on to because nobody would get rid of him, but on my 2 QB league.
Yeah, good luck getting rid of Sam Darnold.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I'm just stoked to see them pair up in that offense and see what they can do, because Mims is just, he's one of my guys, man. I love him. But yeah, so we'll go on to let's go on to our third ideal landing spot, and we see Adam Troutman, who was, I think, both of our. Did you say he was your number 1 tight end coming into the draft?
For fantasy, yes.
Yes.
Well, not coming into the draft. I really don't rank the tight. Coming into the draft, I said stay away from all these tight ends because they're all terrible.
Right.
But after the draft, I did rank a few of them, and he is my number 1 tight end. Right now, which is all that really matters. Let's be honest.
Right. Yeah. And then so Troutman going to the Saints. We've seen, you know, the Saints offense perform before with the Jimmy Graham-esque kind of tight end. And the one thing that I loved about Troutman was getting to watch his combine. You know, sometimes the tight ends get a little bit overlooked at the combine, and seeing the idiosyncrasies of the way that they play the game gets overlooked. But man, Adam Troutman using that blocking sled when they were doing the blocking drills made everybody else look like they were high school players playing against an NFL player. He is just an absolute fucking beast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it before the show, but what I'm looking for, Troutman actually reminds me a lot of the same feelings I got from Dallas Goedert a few years ago, where I thought, man, you know, this Goedert kid, like this dude's a baller. Like you're watching like D2 grainy film that's like come on, like these D2 programs what are they recording their games with? Like, how do they not have HD at this point? Like I'm recording on an HD camera, it cost me like $20. Like, come on, pull it together, dudes. But I remember thinking, like, watching Dallas Goedert, and they're not exactly the same. I think Goddard's a little bit better an athlete, but Troutman's a little bit bigger. So they both have pros and cons, but I remember watching that Goedert film and being like, dang, dude, this dude is just like, he is much better than everyone who's playing against him. He's so big, but very fluid in his movements. He cuts very well. And he's just one of those dudes that he just gets open. And honestly, it reminds me a little bit, obviously, of Goedert. But Jason Witten used to do that a lot too, where I didn't feel like maybe he was the best like straight line athlete. Right. But it seemed like wherever the open spot of the defense was, that there's freaking Witten catching a pass 10 yards down the field because he's wide open, because he just knows how to read defenses. I feel like I get that same kind of vibe from Adam Troutman. I know those are two big comps, and people might be like, "Oh, I don't know about this." Like,
Right.
easy there. Like he's not quite that level yet, but I think he could become something like that based on what I've seen. What I've heard about him is he's a pretty smart kid. People seem to like him, and that is huge when you're talking about coming into an offense that is very well established.
Right.
A quarterback that's going for a Super Bowl. They have Super Bowl. That's their goal.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really. I mean, we can talk about Jared Cook. Jared Cook is not an obstacle.
He's 34 now, isn't he?
Catches on this year, like he's coming.
Right.
And at the tight end position, all you need is a few opportunities to be fantasy viable. We could be talking 2 years from now. We're gonna be talking about, Adam Troutman is the starting tight end for the Saints.
Right.
And he's going to catch, I'm not saying he's going to be 1,000 yards, but I mean, we're talking 700-800 yards. That's all you need. You give him 5-6 touchdowns, you're a tight end 1. So in a position that's just barren right now with a class that I thought was pretty weak to start, Troutman sticks out like a sore thumb to me because I think he has the potential of all these dudes. He has the most potential to be a pass catching weapon that is fantasy viable.
Right. No, I completely agree. Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree with you on that. I mean, he's up in our tier 6 with the likes of, like Antonio Gibson, Bryan Edwards, Zach Moss, all that stuff because of the workload that he has the ability to walk right into. I was saying, I mean, I think Cook is 34 years old now. I mean, the dude is dirt out there. And so, I mean, the path to number 1 reps for him is a very, very easy road to be able to, trek. And then you start looking at the wide receiver core that they have out there. And I mean, it's Michael Thomas and not a bunch else, with the exception of Alvin Kamara coming out of the backfield. I mean, he's going to walk into really, really good opportunities. And I think that Troutman has the ability to seize that. So, I mean, I think we're in consensus coming out of the draft. He's our number 1 overall tight end, and just really excited about the possibility for him moving forward. But
you're going to get, if you want him, this is the great thing about it. If you need a tight end, you're going to be able to get him.
Right.
He's going, I mean, I took him at 403, I think, in one league. I think he went at the 402 in the other league that I was in. So people aren't looking at Adam Troutman. This is a deep class. If you want him and you want to go grab him at the end of the third, like it's third and fourth round picks are like the easiest picks to get in the draft.
Right.
You don't know who they're drafting at that point usually anyway.
Exactly.
So you need a tight end. I'm waiting. And if I have a mid third, I'm just going to sit on it and take him. But if I have, a early 4th and I need to move up, I'm not opposed to, I'll give you a 4th and a 4th next year to move into the late 3rd. Like those picks are nothing to me.
Exactly.
And they're not going to be as good next year anyway. So you might as well go get your dude now.
Right. No, I completely agree, man. So let's get into your bread and butter. We talked about it earlier on in the show, but we're going to go over 3 key players to keep an eye out for on the injury front. And this first one, you said that you were in that dynasty draft there. And I think that you're going to have a little bit of you're going to have some controversy on your hands with this first one with Ball Blast, because we've got Zach Moss as number 1.
Yeah, and this is not a knock on Zach Moss as a player. Please don't come after me. I don't. Here's the thing: what I do doesn't discriminate usually with the player. I don't rank these players in this guide. I'm just looking at their injury histories. I'm just adding info so that you can make your own decisions with it. I make my decisions based off the info. You can take those into account, or you can say, you know what, this dude's an idiot. I can look at these histories and tell you exactly what you need. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, buy it. I don't care how you use the data. Just go get it.
Right.
Zach Moss, though, man, here's the thing about his history. Most of it doesn't matter really that much for his injury history, except for in 2018, he had a knee injury that is questionable. It is a mystery. I haven't been able to find anything on it outside.
Isn't that crazy how nobody can figure out anything about it?
You want to talk about you make me go crazy. Yeah, I hate stuff like this because usually it's reported. So I know what I'm looking at. Not with this one. Nobody knows. I've seen 3 different reports. I have my own opinion about what happened. Very frustrating. But basically, in 2018, he injures himself in practice earlier in the week. And the story, the one that everyone likes to grab onto because it's more interesting, it's basically he hops into bed and re-injures himself. The reason I say re-injures is because the reports I found said that he did have an injury first. So he got hurt in practice. And when he hopped in the bed and re-injured himself or injured himself the first time, if you're listening to someone that doesn't do the research, that just looks it up one time,
right?
His knee locked, basically got stuck at a 90-degree angle and would not straighten. He had surgery. We know he had surgery. And he missed the rest of the season with that injury. And so the problem I have, and the problem that I have been trying to get answers from a few people that have reported it, are that there's a rumor going around that this was an ACL tear.
Wow.
The problem I have with that is that nothing from a medical standpoint lines up with that being the case.
Okay.
I haven't been able to get a single person who has called it an ACL tear. I've only found 2. One is insistent that this is an ACL tear, but will not provide any evidence to show that he knows more than I know. And trust me, he probably doesn't. He probably looked it up, found one article, and this is what he's saying about it.
Tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
And he said, "Oh, major knee injury, definitely an ACL tear." This is why you don't listen to people that aren't medical experts when they're looking at stuff like this, because they don't have the knowledge to do it. They're just spitballing. Anyway, I'll get off that tangent. This is what I will tell you as a medical professional. An injury occurred. If it was an ACL tear, he'd have known.
Right.
If it had occurred earlier in the practice, they would have known that was an ACL tear. The re-injury is very unique in that we know for a fact that he had surgery. We know that the knee locked at 90 degrees. And we know that he returned for spring training camp the following year. Let's just I'll do some just basic medical weed out. I do this with all my patients when I'm trying to diagnose them anyway. I don't diagnose people, but I use anyway. The fact that you return to spring training, if you tear your ACL in November, you ain't practicing in the spring in college. It just doesn't happen. We're talking about 7 to 9 months before you return to sports. So that right there would already immediately remove an ACL being the issue. Let's talk about the injury. We already went through the injury and then re-injury. If it was an ACL, he would have known that. But the key that I think is the biggest tell, if you know anything about how these knees work, the fact that his knee locked at 90 degrees. And so that is textbook meniscus tear. What happens is the meniscus basically folds up. The meniscus is just a spongy piece it's like a half circle. So it's kind of you got 2 of them. So let me try to angle my fingers right here. So you got 2 menisci that sit and they're both basically half moon shaped. And what will happen is sometimes you'll cut one of them, basically cut a portion. And then when you bend your knee, that cut portion is kind of flapping there. It will flap. It will fold over so that when you try to straighten your knee back out, it folds into that flap and it hurts like a son of a gun and locks. And that's what I think happened. He probably has some janky college dorm bed. He bent his knee too far back. That knee flap of the meniscus tear flipped over. When he tried to basically extend his knee back out when he got into bed, he hit the flap and it wouldn't go. It will literally stop your knee and lock it. Textbook. If you don't believe me, go Google it. Whatever. You don't have to believe me. I'm just a doctor. It's fine. So I think it was a meniscus tear. I think the reason it took him longer to recover is because I think they repaired it. A meniscus tear can be treated 2 different ways. You can basically repair it or tie it back together and tie it back down to try to preserve that cushion, that tissue. It's better long-term for players. They get less arthritis because you don't lose the cushion, but it takes longer up front to recover from that. Or you can go in and basically just cut off whatever is floating. So you just go in and it's a meniscectomy and you basically just cut it off. And so it's better for athletes in season because they get back faster, but it's not
Right.
better for them long term because you lose the cushion. So you can't replace the cushion. So once you get rid of the cushion, it's your bone, you're eventually going to develop arthritis at that part of your knee. It's just how knees work.
Okay.
So that is a concern for me from his history. I'll be honest. The 6.25 part of that is the mystery. So
Okay.
I have to account for the fact that I do not know for sure what happened here.
Right.
I am speculating as a medical professional what I think happened based on the research and the data that I found on it, the info I found on it.
Mhm.
But I don't know for sure. So he gets a bump. His grade goes up. So he's a moderate injury risk, even though necessarily we don't know for sure what that was. It could very well be that that was just a meniscus injury and maybe he should have a lower score, but because I can't find it and can't confirm it, I can't 100% rule out that it could have been an ACL.
Okay.
The fact
that's
that he has 6
interesting.
other injuries, he obviously gets banged up when he plays.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, that's the nature of his football, though. I mean, the number one tackle
Yeah,
breaker in the nation, you're gonna end up
he's
getting
a
some injuries.
bulldozer.
Yeah. He's the guy that AJ Dillon has a poster of on his wall. That's what we're looking at right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's go on to our second person that we're looking at with like low-key players to keep an eye out for injury is Michael Pittman, who went to the Indianapolis Colts. So what do you got to say about him?
Yeah, this one's interesting because typically when guys have a long injury history with multiple injuries, you hear about it before or during the draft at some point. Nobody's talking about this. And it's weird to me because it is, while it's not major, it is a history of pretty significant stuff.
Right.
So he broke his clavicle on the left. So this you'll notice that I'm going to go through the injuries.
Okay.
And you're going to notice the trend. 2016, left clavicle fracture. So basically just collarbone. It's most commonly broken bone of the body, but you have surgery on it usually to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find if he had surgery or not because it was a high school injury at the U.S. Army All-American Bowl.
Okay.
2016, he had a hand injury. He did have surgery on this, but we don't really know anything else besides that. Again, we're talking 2016. This is before he actually got into college. So there's not usually a whole lot of info on that kind of stuff,
Right.
Just because he wasn't like a crazily high recruited player. So nothing was really being reported about that, but I do know that he had surgery on his hand. 2017, left high ankle sprain. Okay, high ankle sprain, not ideal.
Right.
He missed 3 games with the injury, so it was pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Again, ankle sprains tend to reoccur. It's a weak point in the body from that point forward.
Right.
You'll start to have issues again. All right, so this is the one that I want you to pay attention to. 2018. It left AC joint sprain. So AC is acromioclavicular. We talked about the clavicle on the left side already.
Mm-hmm.
It's where it basically touches the shoulder or the point of your shoulder. That's your acromion. So AC, acromioclavicular. Joints are always named basically by what they are. So it's where the acromion hits the clavicle. It's basically the point of your shoulder, that joint right there.
Okay.
So he sprains it. Missed a few weeks of practice, no problem. 2018, so still in the same year. So the first one was in March, so that was the spring. Second one's in August. Left AC joint sprain.
Okay.
Now we got 2 in 1 year. Not ideal. Left practice, didn't miss any games. That's good. Mm-hmm. 2018, left AC joint sprain with a bone bruise, and then he had surgery. So this one was in November. So we went March, August, November, 3 straight left shoulder injuries on top of the left clavicle fracture that he already had.
Right.
Seeing the trend.
Yeah.
So basically, he missed a game, but he did end up having surgery on that bone bruise. The surgery was probably not related to the bone bruise. The surgery was probably to stabilize that AC joint because he's had 3 sprains. Sprains are tears. So he's basically torn the ligament in his AC joint 3 times on top of the clavicle fracture. And then that was all in 2018 though. So we got a couple of years from that. The grade adjusts for time spent since the injury. Okay. More recent injuries are weighted higher than previous injuries because if you tear your ACL in 2019, you're more likely to miss games immediately. Right. As opposed to, 2018, probably not going to miss any games because of that injury specifically. And then in 2020, he had a foot sprain. So, again, the number of injuries plays a huge role. Players that stay healthy tend to do it all over their body. Players
Right.
that can't stay healthy tend to get hurt a variety of different ways.
Right.
The
Weaker
problem
joints and
in-
all that stuff.
The reason that Pittman is the most is interesting to me is just because we have 4 of the 7 injuries that I have on his file are all in the same spot. That's a huge weak point. Guess what? He's like 6'3" and he can jump out the gym. Guess where he lands? On his shoulder every
Right.
time he gets tackled. So every time he gets tackled, he lands, I guess half the times, sometimes he'll land on his right shoulder. But I was describing this injury to someone, and the way I look at it is, okay, you jump to make a catch. You're 6'4".
Mhm.
You probably got a 38-inch vertical. So you're 10 feet in the air.
Right.
And then you land on the ground on your shoulder first. You don't think that might come up at some point in the future if you continue to do that?
Right.
Don't do this. This is not medical advice. But think about what it would be like to basically step up. How tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay, so I'm 6'2". So picture you step up a ladder
Mhm.
until you're about 10 foot total from the ground. So you go
Right.
up, basically 3 steps off a step stool,
Mhm.
and then jump off of that step stool and drive your shoulder into the dirt
Yeah.
and see if you don't get hurt.
Right.
keep
Exactly.
So that's
And then doing
why-
that over and over and over
Yeah, and
again.
do that, I don't know, 10 to 15 times a day for the next 5 years. Do you see the issue? Do you see
Oh,
why
yeah.
that is a weak point that could come up in the future? It's
Oh, yeah.
absolutely a problem.
Yeah.
So that's Pittman. Again, this is all laid out beautifully in this guide. So
Right. Yeah. No,
you
for
just
sure.
went through that and you were like, "Oh shit, I didn't know any of that stuff."
No, I read it, dude. I read the
Damn
whole
nuts,
guide.
man. Like, come on. Like,
I
that's
went
a
through
big
I
pitch.
went through the whole guide, man. But yeah, so then we'll get down to the two most curious cases of the NFL draft. Because I was a huge Hunter Bryant guy coming into this draft, and I just kept watching him fall, kept watching him fall until the draft is over and we see them as undrafted. So we've got Hunter Bryant and Thaddeus Moss down here as our last one.
Yeah, same story with both dudes. You're not the only one that was falling in love with these dudes. I still see people falling in love with these dudes, and I loved it because it was a good marketing point for my guide when I'm going on Twitter, and everyone's like, "Dude, I just don't understand what's going on with Thad Moss. I don't understand how Hunter Bryant could have possibly fallen out of the draft completely." 2 dudes, same story.
Well, that's the way I got turned on to your guide. Was I posted that on Twitter and you got at me on it.
Dude, I freaking jumped on that because it was free advertising for
Right.
sure.
Hell yeah.
Hunter Bryant is an interesting one. 2017 he had a partial ACL tear with an LCL tear. So ACL and LCL, but it's only partial. That's okay, except we talked about it earlier. The ACL can't heal itself, so even a partial
Right.
tear is pretty serious. He had surgery for the ACL tear.
Mhm.
Maybe they addressed the LCL tear too. We don't know, but we for sure know that he had to get something done with that ACL tear. He went down trying to make a catch, missed 4 games. Did try to return for a snap against Penn State at the team's bowl game. Pretty bold to try that after only 5 weeks from a partial ACL tear.
Right.
Typically, when I get an athlete, especially like a high school athlete with a partial ACL tear, they're out for like 4 months. So
Right.
good job. You're tough.
Yeah. Hurt your
um,
draft stock, but you looked great that day.
So that following summer, he gets a meniscus tear on the left side, same side,
Okay.
but he has surgery. And so again, got to put your sleuth hat on because you look at that and might say, "Oh, meniscus tear, that's not too bad." The problem is that it's the same knee, and it was described as a re-injured knee. Okay, well, he didn't
Okay.
tear his meniscus the first time.
Right.
He tore his ACL and his LCL the first time. He had off-season surgery, and then from the surgery in June, he missed 9 games
Oh, wow.
that season. That is essentially an 8-month recovery.
Yeah.
Remember when I said ACL tears take about
7 to 8 months.
7-8 months to get back on the field? The rumor is that ACL tear was torn. I am pretty convinced that was the case. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure, based on what I've found, the brace that they had him in and is an ACL tear brace. Meniscus tear, you ain't missing 8 months with a meniscus tear, even if they repair it. Pretty sure that he tore his ACL completely or the rest of the way, however you want to look at it. Part of the reason I think he fell, teams couldn't check out this knee. They couldn't get into this knee. And so you can say, well, oh, they had the combine medicals. Guess what? They don't have enough time to do what they want to do. They want to x-ray, MRI. They want to do the whole shebang with these dudes. And they want, the combine medical, they get like 30 minutes to an hour, maybe per player. They're trying to go through like 400 guys. There's no way they're going to spend enough time. They do it in a day. So you're probably not even getting 20 full minutes.
Right.
They didn't know for sure how this knee was going to check out. So he falls. And so if you don't know the history, you don't understand the fall.
Right.
But if you know the history and you know the circumstances around the fact that teams couldn't check these guys out medically, you understand. It makes a lot more sense. You're like, hey, man, like if I was going to invest millions of dollars into somebody, I'd want to make sure their knee was all right too.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing. So that was Hunter Bryant. Thad Moss, similar situation, a little bit more publicly known, I guess. He had two surgeries on his left foot for a Jones fracture. That's a fifth metatarsal fracture. It's basically just the bone that attaches to the bones in the pinky toe, the long bone in your foot, and it breaks. And so they basically have to put a screw in it because it doesn't heal very well because feet never heal well.
Right.
That was on the left side in 2018, and he had to take a medical red shirt. Okay, red flag. You miss a whole season. People are going to be concerned. Then at the combine, they found another Jones fracture in his right foot. So now
really?
He's got two foot issues. Both of them basically require surgery. Usually they require two surgeries. They require a surgery to put the pin in to fix the bone, and then they also require a surgery to take the pin back out because the pin can break or bend. Thad Moss is an injury concern. They basically, the last thing teams heard was, oh, he has to have surgery on his foot. Okay. Foot injuries are not to be trifled with. They can ruin careers. The problem with the foot is it's really complex and it's really hard to rehab. I don't like playing with foot injuries because it's not like a knee. I can make a knee do stuff. Like, what am I going to make you like curl your toes? Like the inside of your foot doesn't, it's really just to like hold you up.
Right.
And you have to use it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's constant pounding on it.
There's no good way to recover from that. We don't know how long this is going to take for him to recover from this surgery. We're hoping maybe we'll get him this year, but we might not. And so it's not worth a draft pick for most of these teams to invest in a guy like that. So that's the case of the two tight ends that fell that nobody thought they'd fall. I think personally you can relate it both back to injuries, which you can obviously find in this guide. I know it sounds like a big ad, but dude, I mean, the fact that you can put stuff together, and here's the thing, you don't have to be a doctor to look at this stuff and go, now that I know that that's the case, like maybe that is probably what teams were thinking. And so
well, I mean, this is just like you were saying, using this as a supplemental piece when you're going on your draft guide. I mean, it puts so many puzzle pieces together.
Absolutely
it connects the dots that you wouldn't normally see. It's an essential piece to any draft guide, in my opinion. After I've seen it, you made a believer out of me.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that you reached out because, I sometimes I feel like I'm kind of like echoing this information like out to no one. And I think that the more people that understand the value of this, the more I can get this information to people. It's just going to help everybody. I mean, it really is. My goal is for people to be better at fantasy football because they understand the medical side of things. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of ways that you can do that. My thing is like, I truly am obsessed with the medicine part of it, but I'm also obsessed with fantasy football. And so you can get medical information. Any doctor can look at that and tell you like, okay, this is probably going to be, I've been doing this for 3 years, dude. Like assessing injury risk is my jam.
Right.
And so to me, you want the dude that doesn't just like you got the medical knowledge, but if you can't apply it to fantasy, you're not really helping anybody out because they have the fantasy knowledge, you got the medical knowledge. But like, if you can't bridge the gap between the two, you're not really doing anyone a service. You're not really providing any value. That's what this guide is designed to do. I take it out of your hands. You don't have to really know how to do it. If you're looking at these and you're like, oh, dude, I don't really know what a knee sprain, like, why do I care about this knee sprain? Why do I care about this, this foot injury? Like, I've already done the analysis for you. So
right.
you can, if you don't understand the injuries, you can look at the analysis and go, okay, he's concerned about this. Like, maybe I should be thinking about this. Maybe NFL teams are thinking about this. I can tell you NFL teams are thinking about this, but it's just one more piece of the puzzle. It's unique. I had a lot of fun making it. I took a lot of pride in it. I'm glad that people are enjoying it.
Yeah,
if
man.
you want it though, you can go to thefantasyheadliners.com. It's a 2020 rookie injury guide. Reach out to me on Twitter if you have a question and you're like, man, like, how do I get it? What do I need to do? Like, who do I pay? Reach out to me on Twitter. I answer pretty much everybody that responds to me, unless you say something stupid, then I'm not going to answer you. But if you want the injury guide, trust me, you get my attention.
Right.
But yeah, that's where you get it. And, all my stuff, if you like this video and if you're like, dude, I really want this guy to talk about injuries more, I want to see him do more. Like, we have a YouTube channel at the Fantasy Headliners. If you subscribe to this channel, you're going to get some benefit out of that channel too. You probably have heard of it. Go check it out. Go subscribe. We're going to be doing medical videos all summer. And then when the season starts, I'm doing breakdowns every week over there. So, it's going to be a lot of content, but it's unique. And so it is, basically that's why they brought me on, is because they wanted the medical stuff. So, right. I'm excited because I get a new way to basically present this information. It's not a podcast. I think YouTube is the future. For fantasy football, you're seeing it already. Everybody's trying to do YouTube because they don't get it. But I think that we've already got a huge head start at the Fantasy Headliners, and we're doing it the right way. And we got people asking us how we do it, because we are what I think a lot of people want to become in this industry on the YouTube side of things. And we have a huge community. Headliner Nation is the freaking bomb.
I'm a huge fan of you guys' content.
Dude, we got hundreds of people commenting on videos, interacting. It really is a big family. So, like, if you love this show, go check out that show. You can love both shows. That's the best part of it. Like,
exactly, man.
If you're from the Headliner Nation and you're coming over here to watch me do this, dude, freaking subscribe to my dude here. Like, this is good brother. Show. Like, he's doing good stuff. Like, support everybody. Like, let's show some love here. It's not a competition.
No, hell no, man. That's the best part about this, is everybody is so cool. Everybody's so inviting,
Oh yeah.
And you get so many diverse backgrounds. I mean, with like the medical part, and then you've got like film viewers, you've got data analysis, you've got guys that played the game, and it's just this community that comes together to be able to do this freaking fantasy football sport that we love, Yeah,
we're talking about a game, dog. Like, let's have fun with this.
Exactly. But yeah, and so we've talked about the injury guide, and guys, also go and check out the Triple D FFP's new draft guide. We just dropped it a couple days ago. It's got a free cheat sheet on there. It's got a draft board. It's got tiered analysis for the top 40 rookies. And I think that this is really going to be something that can help you win your draft, and combine that with the injury guide. And I'm guaranteeing you're going to win the draft.
Dude, so you're going to kill it.
Man.
I look at it. I looked at it today when I was doing a rookie draft. Like, dude, it's incredible stuff.
Oh yeah, man. All right. Well, hey, man, Ethan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great having you. You have awesome insight. So hopefully we can have you back soon. But just thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, brother. See you guys later.